Welcome to a new Wheel of Time TV show versus books YouTuber collaboration. Joining me today is the Sword and the Pen from the Sword and the Pen and Sword and the Pen Reflections, a new Wheel of Time reader who is also a book editor. Before we begin, I do have to apologize. This video was accidentally recorded at 640 by 360 resolution, which is not ideal, but fortunately you don't really need to see all that much, so hopefully you will enjoy listening to our presentation today. So without further ado, let's get into the review.
It is so great to have you on my channel. I would love to introduce you to the people who are watching this who may not have heard of you or not watching your channel. So tell us about you. Who are you?
I'm Amber, and I am from The Sword and the Pen and The Sword and the Pen Reflections. I've got two channels, one highly neglected and the other highly oversaturated with all my other editing stuff that it was supposed to be like a spare channel, and now it's the main channel. But there you go. I am a freelance editor, and I thought it would be fun to discuss storytelling and all of the different aspects that go into telling a good story or creating likable characters, things like this. And especially comparing books to their adaptations in movies and TV shows. And that's kind of taken off. So that's what I've got. I've got Shadow and Bone, and I have The Wheel of Time season 1. And I'm planning on doing some others, including some adaptations from animation to live action. I don't want to do One Piece because I just think it's fine the way it is. Like, it's perfect. I don't have any critique. It's doing good. But I'm going to do Avatar The Last Airbender when that comes out to get further into just doing book reviews, especially why I think certain books are doing a really great job in telling certain stories.
Fantastic. Have you worked in television? Because I know that you're focusing on book editor, but then you have all of this commentary about TV. So I'm wondering what your experience is there.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I am 40 years old, and so I've got about 20 years of working in not only publishing but also independent filmmaking. So I have quite a few friends in Arizona, which is where I live, who do work in the industry, and actually a few higher up veterans. Like, I worked with David Stipes, who did the special effects for Star Trek: The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and stuff. So I've been behind the scenes quite a bit as a logistics manager and an assistant director and a producer. And there are certain things that I see in movies, and I'm like, I'm spoiling the magic for everybody else, but I think somehow it helps you understand why certain things looked like they worked or didn't work or what could have been better. So I bring that expertise to the table as well. I mean, it's not expertise, but experience. I bring that experience to the table.
I don't have any experience in filming or creating anything audio visual. My experience is entirely in writing and creative fiction, as well as marketing and PR. So I'd make some commentary on how the Wheel of Time has been advertised to its
Nice.
base, which I think is some of the problem that people are having with it, because it was presented as something that was going to be closer to the books than it ended up being. We will get into that and discuss some of the details around what is working with the show and what is not working with the show. So for those of you who are just tuning in, this is a Wheel of Time season 2-ish dive. I think we'll talk a little bit about season 1 as well, since all of the content that you have published currently is season 1.
Yeah.
And I just want to like confirm for the audience, so they all understand like what you're doing. You had not read the books before you started
No.
watching the TV show. You saw this popular TV show that was a fantasy advertised, and your idea was to read the books alongside the TV show as it was airing.
Correct. So I've heard about the Wheel of Time since back in the 90s.
Oh
And
yeah,
everybody's like,
been
oh,
around.
you should read it. It's great. And I was like, I'll avoid it. Sounds like
Long.
it's getting really long.
Yeah.
And then, when the show came out, and my mother watched it when it first came out, and she's like, it was okay. I'm like, all right. But then I heard season 2 was coming out, and I was like, I wonder if people like this and if it's any good. And I saw the trailer, and I said, it looks interesting. I'll give it a shot. So yes, reading alongside watching the series, and I'm trying to do it simultaneously. So for the first season, what I was doing is I was going back and forth between reading the chapters that I was told correlate to the episode first, and then I would watch the episode. And then if I watched the episode and I was like, what the hell is this? It wasn't in the book. Then I would go and
There's
read
quite
a
a few
little
of
bit
them,
more.
yeah.
Yeah, I would try to read ahead a little bit, and I'd be like, this clearly isn't happening. So I would just stop. But then I would try to reverse it for the next episode. So I would watch episode 2 first, and then I would read until I was like, surely they're going to not cover this much in a second episode, and then I would stop, and yeah, you get the idea. So I'm trying to experience them at this simultaneously, so I don't have a bias either way.
Where are you in the books right now? Because the season 2, just so everyone is aware, at the time that this is filming, season 2 has aired all of the episodes except for the last one. So we are recording this right before the final episode. Where are you currently in the books?
So I handled season 2 a little differently. I read all of book 2
Okay.
before I got to episode 2 of the second season. And then my goal is to have, well, I mean, I spoiled it because I had so many people in my Discord going, you gotta like tell us what you think of the second season. Like, are we nuts for thinking these certain things? And I said, okay, I'll watch it. So I watched it, all of what was out. So I'm caught up. I'm caught up on the show, but I'm only on chapter 7 in book 3.
Okay. So you're a little bit behind in the books in terms of if they're combining books 2 and 3, which I don't really think that they're doing outside of a couple of very small examples.
Yeah.
I thought that's what they were going to do, but I in retrospect, like looking backwards, I think that they are not doing that.
It's looking like the finale of season 2 is going to be the finale of The Great Hunt.
Looking back at season 1, let's just kind of start there. What percentage of the first book do you think the show adapted?
30% of the book made it to the show. There were a lot of things that were very reminiscent of the book, but they didn't match in a way that made sense in the show like it did in the book. So certain characters were saying things that it wasn't that person who said it in the book, or they did certain things where it wasn't that character who did it in the book. And in the end, I'm going, well, there was a reason why this character said it in the book or did this thing in the book, because everything that a character says, thinks, does, their personality, it should be catered towards leading that character on a specific journey for that character. And so when you jumble that all up, something's wrong. Something is going to turn out to feel either contrived in the adaptation, or you're going to have to just finagle a way to get your character to where it's supposed to go, or just maybe a different ending altogether, which is kind of what we saw.
I think we'll talk about this a little bit more detail a little bit later on, but to me, it feels like they took everything in the books, took out things they didn't like, put it in a blender, and then rejigsawed it together to create like a new puzzle that has elements of the original, but doesn't feel like the same story, and
it does not at all
like the same characters and themes and the things that I thought they were going to keep. The plot I understood was going to be shortened and rearranged, but they changed so much more than just the plot.
Totally agree with it. We'll get to it in the questions, but you had in the questions about, what has to change for an adaptation. And I was like, yes, I agree with you 100%. You've got your head is screwed on right, because you know exactly what should be in an adaptation.
I found your channel and started watching your reviews before I thought to reach out to you saying, hey, do you want to do a collab? And I remember commenting on one of your videos and you recognizing me and saying that you had seen some of my videos and thought that I was less nice than you.
Yes.
Or no, I was nicer than you. I was nicer than you in my commentary on the Wheel of Time TV show, which I thought was funny because I regularly get comments in my videos about how mean I am.
It happens.
Liking the show. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think we're all going to get that from people, and that's fine. It's an opinion. And I try to state that in my videos. I don't always do it in every video though, but this is my opinion. I do give my professional opinion, but also my personal opinion. I'm going to tell you, if I'm like, this character annoys the hell out of me, I want them gone. I don't care if they're in the book anymore. Get them off the screen. I will say that. And no, for you, it was your earlier ones of season 1. And then actually on my way, I was out of town this last weekend, and on my way back into town, I listened to the ones from season 1 that I didn't watch of yours.
Meaner towards the end.
I caught it. Yes, you got much meaner, especially on episode 6. So, and the finale, which I was like, oh, good. We're on the same page. No, I don't mind if people disagree. If they want to talk about something that they felt like I got wrong, I'm so willing to debate that. And there have been a few comments that have changed my mind on certain things where I go, I didn't like this. And then they tell me, oh, but what about this? And I go, let me watch it again. And I go, oh, you're right. I guess that does work. Yeah.
That happens to me too. I'll watch the show once. Sometimes I'll watch it twice, and I don't catch everything. So I will do the recording that evening or the next day. And you doing this, it takes many, 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 many hours to create reaction videos and review videos of this length. So I don't have enough time to really do a deep dive into everything to make sure that I 100% understand everything that happened in the episode. So occasionally I will make a snap judgment that on a rewatch, I'll be like, oh, whoops, I got that one wrong. Or I didn't, I missed that scene entirely. Or like just like something happened where it's not perfect in like the raw reaction.
I think you actually have really good pacing in your videos because I look at mine and I go, what the hell? Why am I picking apart every freaking line? I really set a bad precedent for myself in episode 3 because I absolutely despised the introduction of romance between Nynaeve and Lan, which was something that I was dissatisfied with in the book and wanted to see done well on screen. And they just missed the mark. A lot of people will say, oh, that's the romance is there. I'm like, well, but it's still not built up to be a romance that can be engaged in and believed in the books. Like you can say, oh, there was evidence of it being there, sort of like a detective solving a mystery, but that doesn't mean that you're emotionally invested in it. After that, picking it apart, I spent a half an hour on just like 3 conversations that Lan and Nynaeve had in my review. And since then, my videos have been like 3 hours long, and I'm like, okay, I got to edit this down to 2, so, but I don't want to do that. But you're doing it right. You're just getting to the main points. You speak very clearly and articulately about what the biggest issues are, and you also do mention the things that you liked, I think, which shows good balanced review. And I think that's what a lot of people who really love the show, and I will say there are a lot of shills for the show as well, because they'll come on and just make some blatant comment, and I'm like, how does this apply to what I do? Like, you're just saying like I suck and I don't know anything, and I'm going, okay, point out where I messed up, and well, maybe you're right. I don't know. But yeah, I like your pacing. It's good because I feel like you say all the stuff I do, but more concisely.
I think I'm always concise. My challenge with running a YouTube channel is that instinctually my standard is like up here, and I want to spend time writing an essay and then editing that essay and making it perfect and then recording, but no one has time for that. I don't have time for that.
I know. I did that for one video and I was like, no,
so hard.
No.
Spend like a weekend on just the essay and then like another weekend on the recording and then another weekend on the editing, and I just get tired. So
then you record and you go, why did I say that word twice? When I want to show that I actually have good vocabulary. So I have to go re-record now. Yeah, no way.
Okay, so you are reading the books and you're watching the show. We've talked a little bit about some of the things on the show that you don't like the Nynaeve Lan romance. Do you like the books?
I do like the books. I would say that if I was not reviewing the show and doing this comparison, I probably would have stopped after book 1 and taken either a very long break before getting to book 2, or maybe not even picked it up at all, because book 1, while I enjoyed it, it wasn't one that I was like, wow, I want to spend this much time on another one, but I'm so glad that I was doing these reviews because book 2 was way better paced. It was so much more engaging. I felt like Robert Jordan really grasped the idea of creating character development and relationships in the second book. And so I'm glad I stuck with it. Book 3, we've only really been in Perrin's head for the most part.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah. So it's actually, this was book 2 that I just held up. Book 3 is over in my backpack still because I took it with me on my trip. But yeah, so much better in the second book. And I feel like this is something that I would want to continue reading now that I've gotten past that rough start. But Harry Potter was the same thing for me. It took me like
the first
months.
2 books are a little slow. Yeah.
Actually, it was just the first chapter of book 1. I couldn't get past it. I was like,
I don't know if I can get past Privet Drive.
Yes. And my best friend, this was because we were reading them as they were being published. She's like, no, you got to read past chapter 1. I was like, oh, well, you should have told me. Like, I read the first chapter the first time and I was like, nah. And I read it the second time to see if I missed something. And I was like, I didn't miss nothing. This is boring.
Oh my gosh. I don't want to go down a rabbit trail of the Harry Potter books. We could do that in a subsequent video. But in sticking with the Wheel of Time, I will say,
sorry.
No, that's okay. The Eye of the World, written in the 90s the way it was when people were clamoring for more Lord of the Rings, feels like a Lord of the Rings derivative book. A well-done one compared to others that are like it that were also released at that time. But it does have a lot of familiar elements that are maybe too familiar. I think that the story really hits its stride in later books. So I really enjoyed The Great Hunt because it has one of the cleanest of all the books, honestly, the cleanest like plot line where it has like an inciting incident and rising action and
Yep.
very exciting climax and the denouement. Some of the middle books you'll hear talked about as the slog don't
I've heard
have
about them.
because they do have it if you combine them together, but like it's
Okay.
so long like to get to those climaxes that you have to just like have a lot of staying power for that rising action over so many point of views across like multiple books. And I think that that's hard to sustain as a reader, especially if you were someone like me who was reading them like every couple of years as they came out, like trying to remember what happened in the previous next one came out was really hard. The Great Hunt's one of the more concise like of the stories in the book. But I think a lot of people agree that The Shadow Rising, the fourth book, is one of the best overall. Yeah.
That's what I've heard. And I'm probably going to zing through book 4 after the series is done, just because I've heard it's so good.
I think season 3 is going to skip a lot of book 3 and jump to book 4. I don't know, but that seems likely based on just some predictions that I have for how they've been doing things. But I don't know. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, I was surprised. We're going to get to it, I know, but how little of the Great Hunt seems to be
exactly
in,
like
season 2.
So I say that with like I don't know, because they might just get rid of the plot in the books entirely and start doing their own thing. So you are watching season 2 and you are going to review season 2.
Yes. My episode 1 is already recorded. I have been very slowly editing it, but I'm doing it, I promise.
Is season 2 better than season 1?
In many ways, yes. But I also am not aware of everything that is happening in the books that might be getting screwed up, and I'm actually sure are getting screwed up by things that they have decided to change. I mean, I didn't have to be an expert on the entire lore to see that there were things that were done differently in season 1 that I know that's a fundamental change that is going to mess up what's happening in the future. It doesn't matter where this book series go. This is such a big difference that it's going to mess stuff up further down the line. So I don't trust these writers to make choices that are going to be good for taking the story where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, my impression of watching the show is that they're trying to write a fun fantasy and they don't really care if it's consistent, if the magic system makes sense, if even the characters' motivations and actions make sense based on what we have been told about them from previous scenes. It seems to be that it's a big effort to just try to make like zinger moments and dramatic dialogue seem to be the thing that's driving the script writing, as opposed to telling a coherent story, building a lore, explaining a world, showing a overarching conflict, which is the dragon has been reborn. What does this mean? Yeah, it's much more interpersonal relationships and interpersonal drama, and a lot of other like smaller plot points seem to take center stage, and a lot of the lore building seems to take a backstage.
And it's fine to have your story center on the character development if that's going to be really crucial to the ending. But like one of my biggest complaints about season 1, because I totally agree with you about they're just throwing dialogue in there because it would be cool to have this character say that
and this in this way.
Yes, and I was
voice.
like, it doesn't sound like this character should say this, but okay, they're gonna But like the climax of season 1. Let's take the books out of this. Pretend there's no books, just the show. What was the big test for Rand? It was, you must sacrifice your desire to be with Egwene. Like you're going to give her up. You're going to let her go, right?
Yep.
Everything about his story should have been about how difficult it's going to be for him to do that. And you show that by having him be the one who's holding on to her. But I was like, he was never holding on to her. Anytime she was like, I want to go do my own thing, he's like, fine, I'll just go sulk. And then she's like, well, wait, don't you want me still? And I'm like, yeah, like this wasn't a hard choice for him. He'd already made the choice a million times before in the show. She was, if anything, she should have been the dragon to make that choice to let go of him. But they didn't do that.
I think they were trying to kind of push that narrative for a while where we were supposed to believe that she was the dragon. But I don't think anyone, even people that are not book readers, ever really thought that. So I don't know if that mystery story paid off. I don't personally think that it did.
Out of all the characters, Egwene probably had some of the least interesting interactions, the least interesting drama going on. The only thing that happened to her was she got captured and then she
Briefly.
escaped. Yes, very briefly. And then she escaped. And then she was told that she's very powerful, but not nearly as powerful as Nynaeve.
As Nynaeve,
That
yeah.
was it.
I don't think any of the main characters that Edmund's Field for are as prominent or as interesting in the TV show as they are in the books. Now, Matt,
Yeah.
I can understand he wasn't that interesting of a character in the Eye of
Mhm.
the World either, but we got very little information about Rand, who ends up being
Yeah.
the main character in, you know, for that has to carry this whole show, and we barely see him do anything on screen, and certainly nothing that is like exciting and heroic.
Yeah.
So I think that's a miss, and I can speculate as to why they did that. There's a lot of speculation out there, but it really seemed like the show was like the Nynaeve story, the Aes Sedai story, the story of the White Tower, and Moiraine's story as the like reposition to be the main character. And I don't think it was you, as another YouTuber that I was watching did a very nice breakdown of why Moiraine should not be the main character of the Wheel of Time, because she is the kind of Dumbledore Gandalf
Yeah.
type character, and making that character your main character creates a whole host of problems, because the main character is supposed to be, you know, the ignorant one that learns things and is taking a proactive role in an adventure story, and the mentor is supposed to be all wise and all knowing and somewhat like
Yes.
reserved in what they share, and trying to combine those two things is really challenging. And I think in this case, it just made her look stupid.
Yeah, well, they
And
had to make her look stupid because they're trying to make this her journey. And
right.
like you said, it is a growth story. And any story that you look at, I would say the best ones actually, because not any, but the good ones, the ones we all like, usually involve character development of some kind, some sort of a change, an arc, something that they are challenged in and they have to overcome, and then they attain usually the thing that they need, but not what they want. I'm sure you've heard of this as a writer. But with Moraine, yeah, she is the Gandalf character. She is the sage, so she should have already been through that journey. And
Mhm.
because she hasn't been through it, they're like, well, we need her to have a journey, so we're going to make her more dumb and doing more immature things. So that way she has to get mature and wise in the story. And that's just so not interesting, because we're going, why is this idiot our hero?
Right,
It's
exactly.
harsh, but I tend to let the harshness just fly when I'm really annoyed by something that could have been so good. Could have been so good.
Well, and especially if you're starting the story 20 years after she's been focused on this mission. Like, it'd be one
Yeah.
thing if they retold the Wheel of Time from the time that she first heard the foretelling and turned New Spring, which is one of the prequel books, into like its own show.
Yeah.
Like
That would have
starting it
been
off.
good. I think
Yeah,
people would
but
have enjoyed something like that. And then you can have Moraine as your heroine.
you could just turn New Spring into a show. Start with the prequel, because starting it 20 years down the line, where she just seems to not know what the prophecies are, she doesn't know who she's looking for, she doesn't ask good questions. Like,
And then when she finds them, she doesn't care. Like,
yeah,
that to me was like,
yes.
20 years of your life have been about finding these kids, and like, well, we'll find them when we find them. Like,
And I know
okay.
we're kind of getting off into the
Oh, I'm
weeds
sorry.
now, but no. This is not a problem, not a problem at all. But you know, they make this big emphasis in season 2 that she's become this cold person who no longer has the ability to keep up with the relationships in her life, with her family, with her sister that they introduce, and all of that is because she sacrificed her, you know, her well-being and her mental health to finding the dragon reborn, and it's injured her in this like, you know, terrible way. But at the same time, her romantic relationship with Swan seems to be like more
Fine.
important than anything, because she swears on the oath rod in the previous season to like
Yeah.
obey Swan Sanche, and then we have this dramatic episode 7, like, oh, all of Moraine's relationships are collapsing and it's so sad. But I just feel like I'm being bounced between walls with what is important to Moraine, because she says it's the mission, it's the dragon reborn, but she's showing me something
Yeah.
else. And so I don't know what they were going for with that, but it just felt very inconsistent for her character.
I think you've nailed it there. It does feel a bit like a teen drama with her. And part of it is also that if
These 70-year-old women.
yes, I know,
Supposed
how
to be
bizarre.
acting like teenagers. Yeah.
And here's the thing. You can, I think we're going to get further into this when we talk about characters and specific points in the series that are worthy of further discussion. But her character, if she's supposed to be our hero, should have something about her that we are rooting for, that we want to be, we want to see succeed.
Yeah.
And she's just not showing anything that I feel like I can root for. I mean, I don't even know what she wasn't really looking. She was looking for the kids, and then when she found them, she didn't really care that she had them. Like,
Yep.
and then,
she's like, okay.
and then she's got Rand, but then she just lets him go. And then, I mean, I don't know what she's okay. So I have watched all of season 2, and I've been trying to debate with myself, what exactly was her plan for this season? Like, what was she trying to do? Because I still can't quite figure it out. If she's still on her mission, why did she not want Lan with her? Does she not view herself as being important to it anymore? Why doesn't she just go walk into the blight then?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, really. I mean, and it's what you said earlier, that the characters, it feels like it'd be really cool if we had them say this or do this, but they're not thinking about what would make sense for this character being on the journey that they're supposed to be on. Yeah, because her motivations are so unclear, and that is not good storytelling. And you can say, oh, well, that's the mystery, we're going to find out what her motivation is, and it's going to make all of this forgivable. Like, well, you're carrying on way too long. Like, we should know by the beginning of episode 2 that she was treating Lan the way she was for a certain reason, but I still can't see what that reason was supposed to be. All I can see is, oh, you were being immature, which is why when Lan was like, I'm sorry it took me so long. It's not your fault, Lan. She was just being a baby and not telling you what she needed, which was for you to say, you know what, step aside and shut up, and I'm going to take over for a second here. I know it's harsh, but she was acting like a teenager who was sulky and just, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to cause destruction everywhere that I go. Nobody wants to watch that in an adult, like you said, 70-something-year-old woman, because it's A, not believable, and B, just not likable. So
yeah, I really dislike what they did too with taking away her powers. I don't think that it
that never happens.
No,
because I haven't gotten to any of that in the book, and I'm going, okay, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, not going to try to spoil you intentionally. There are other characters that go through something kind of like that, but Moraine does not. So her arcs in the books and you said you're on book 3, right? So
yeah.
In the first book, she's trying to find the Dragon Reborn. The Eye of the World is a totally different thing than what happens in the TV show. And then in the Great Hunt, her plan, which she is on the same page with the Amerlin seat on, is to let Rand escape his belief that Aes Sedai are controlling him, because they know that the prophecies and the pattern are going to drag him into this leadership position, whether he wants to or not. And so she's trying to show that he can make his own choices and go his own way up to a point, because she wants him to accept the mantle of leadership. And that's why she takes away all of his coats and replaces them all with Lord's coats, and then makes him second in command and does all of those things. So she's still manipulating him, but she's doing it from a distance. And he can feel that, and he's trying to, run away from Aes Sedai. It does that even harder in book 3. And I don't want to spoil book 3 for you, but like a lot of that plot line is Rand coming to terms with the fact that he is the Dragon Reborn, and this is his destiny, and he has to start being proactive and less reactive, because he's not going to be able to escape that destiny.
That to me makes a lot of sense. Now, wouldn't it have been nice if in episode 7, that meeting with the Amerlin seat and whatever, or even when Rand meets up with Moraine, even if she just said, I let you go because I could tell you felt like I was controlling you. Just even something like that.
Something like that.
I mean, that would have been the time to do it, because at that point, I'm still going, I don't know what the hell this lady's trying to do. What is she doing?
In the TV show, I don't either. I don't know what the Amerlin is trying to do. I don't know what Moraine is trying to do. I know what they said, but there's so many contradictions with what they're doing versus what they're saying. And even sentence to sentence, they're like contradicting themselves with what it is that they're there for. So I think, in the most recent episode, the Amerlin wants to cage the Dragon Reborn and then like throw him at the Dark One like a weapon, because that's what Tower Law says, which is not in the books. And Moiraine wants to help him to achieve his goals, but they never really talk about what the goals are. Like, who is the Dragon Reborn? What is he supposed to do? Why, like, if there's this prophecy that he's supposed to declare himself on Tomenhead, which they mentioned twice in episode 7, why does the Amerlin think that she can have him declare himself in Kyrian? Like, what is because she's been part of this 20-year plan too, and
Yeah.
suddenly she seems to forget that there are prophecies and there are these things that are supposed to happen. To me, it's just very convoluted. Like, I don't know what the main storyline is.
A lot of that is just, giving your characters very specific roles in the story. And I really do. I know that we've said it a couple times already in this interview, but it comes down to, wouldn't it be great if we had this character say or do this thing? I really think that's it. I think that that's it for a lot of what we're seeing. Because, okay, now I have to take this with a grain of salt because I don't know what is true coming from my commenters or not, but I have been told that the showrunner, while he claims to be a fan, actually has not thoroughly read the books, like is not somebody who has read them multiple times, but has maybe even just skimmed through them and decided I really like certain things about it. And I'm going, that sounds like somebody who's writing a fan fiction who's like, oh yeah, I saw a trailer for Twilight and now I have a really great idea for a book.
I can't speak to what Rafe Judkins has or has not read when it comes to the story. I don't know. I can tell the evidence that he's writing some kind of a fan fiction style retelling does to me ring true. His motivations for that, I can't say. I think in interviews he said that he wore out the first couple of books when he was a kid, but he may not have ever read the entire series. I don't think that there is a quote for him saying that he, finished the story. Like, it might have been when he was a teenager, he read some of them and then abandoned it and then thought, gosh, this would make a good primetime TV show with a major network, had some connections in play, got that rolling and is now, rolling in it. But I can't say because I haven't met him. He seems like a nice guy. But beyond what he said in interviews, the only thing that I know about him is that he really loves the show Survivor. And I think that plays into why he is so interested in Aes Sedai politics and immature people trying to one up each other in these episodes, because some of that comes off as the thing that he thinks is most interesting, which to me is not the most interesting thing about this story. And if anything, Robert Jordan's commentary was these people are the next thing to Dark Friends, people who are just in it for themselves and doing minor politicking for power and such while the world burns, are a problem.
Yeah.
So I don't,
I'm going to be watching these episodes now with the Survivor filter in the back of my mind going, yes, I see it now.
Yeah.
I did not know that about him. That is so funny. But it does feel like it's something that he enjoyed but wanted to do his own thing with, in which case say inspired by Wheel of Time and do your own thing. I mean, I would happily watch something like that. I'm sure all the fans of the books would happily watch something like that. But when you say, oh, this is our adaptation, we really need to define that term, because I think a lot of people have an idea, the audience, a lot of them have an idea of what an adaptation should be. And that's not what I think a lot of these people making these movies are thinking. So
no, they're thinking they want to make money like that. In my opinion, I think that's a lot of what is going on in the kind of the Hollywood back rooms is, hey, we want a fantasy show that can compete with Game of Thrones because it made HBO all this money. What kind of options are there for Amazon to do something similar? That's where I think all of this began. But as far as adaptation versus based on, I believe in season 1, they put out all of this very successful PR that it was going to be a faithful adaptation, that it was being written by fans of the books, that Rafe had worn out all of the copies, that they hired a consultant who was a super fan who had read the story 50 times and knew every single small detail and was a consultant on the program. And they had Brandon Sanderson, who wrote the last 3 books of the story, on as an editor, but his recommendations were only taken for a couple of episodes. They were not taken for the entire season. And I think he's not been involved in season 2 at all. So there's big PR play of this is going to be the Wheel of Time changed for TV. And it ended up, like you said, about 30% an adaptation, rescrambled and reinterpreted to tell an entirely different story. And I think in season 2, they might have backed off on that a little bit. I think it's more of, it says based on now or inspired by in some of the promos, but I think it's kind of too late at this point for expectations going in. People are sour on it.
it's such a big problem. Like you having experience or being a PR lady, would I would think that this would be obvious to some big corporation like Amazon that, okay, you have this book series with a huge pre-existing fan base, huge.
Yeah.
They can be either your biggest supporters and they will spread the word for you about how amazing the show is, or they can be your worst enemies and tell everybody how terrible it is. And I just don't know why you would choose the latter and say, you know what, I'm going to do things that subvert their expectations, and it changes things so dramatically. I mean, little changes are so necessary for an adaptation. Right. And I know that we're going to discuss that further later. But when you change characters, magic systems, story, it's too much. It's way too much to change and expect that people are going to just accept this. And I mean, I just don't, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, what was it? I think we talked about it. I don't remember if we were recording already, but we mentioned One Piece. One Piece amazes me with how successful it. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was great. But it's a huge hit because the fans really love it and are telling people to watch it. I probably wouldn't have watched it if there weren't like 5 other booktubers who love the One Piece manga and the anime, and they were like, oh, I can't wait to see this. And they watched it and said it was great. I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch it. And I watched it and I was like, this was great. Now I'm actually interested in the books and the manga. And, you know, I'll tell other people. I have told so many people I love the One Piece show, even though I've never read it. But that's what good fans will do for your show. If it's good, if the show is pleasing the fans, they will spread the word. And I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on about that.
No, but I'm right there with you. I feel like it's not necessarily that the show they're creating is, well, I do think it's bad, but it's not necessarily bad for everybody that it's intended for. Like, I think that they have a very intentional audience that they're making this show for, and it's not for fans of the books. But my question is, why not? Because if you had made the show more for the fans of the books, they would, like you said, be huge advocates to tell everyone, watch this show. From where I'm sitting, I can do critical reviews of the show, but I don't want to call up people I know and be like, watch this show with me, because I just feel like it's a very mixed experience, and that if you haven't read the books, you're not going to understand a lot of things. If you had read the books, you're going to be disappointed unless you just watch it very, very uncritically, which some people do, and they really do seem to enjoy it. I think the fandom is fairly split on whether or not it's a watchable show. It just disappoints me that it could have been better. Like, this is a franchise, or not franchise, and this is an IP that has a loyal following, that was meticulously written, where the world building and characters were very solid, and all they had to do was truncate the plot. Like, fewer characters, like, we're not going to do everything that happens in the books. You know, let's find the major beats and the major high points for our season endings and tell a tighter story. Like, that all would have been fine. Things cut, things rearranged, but they changed absolutely everything foundational to the story itself, down to, you know, how the magic works, what the main plot is.
The very first line, I was like, wait a minute. I don't know much about this book series, but this doesn't sound like what I'm supposed to be hearing about the magic system. So
it's very strange. Very strange choices. Okay, so we knew that adapting a book series this long was going to require changes. But is the way that they're doing it with 8 episode formats the only way to do it? Or what should they have done, in your opinion?
I mean, I'm going to say first off that anybody who thinks you can't take 13 books and compress them into 8, especially when people say there are several books in the series that are a bit lengthy, drag on, and I guarantee you're going to find some plot lines that you can kind of, like you said, you can truncate, you can combine certain things. I'm actually not totally against combining the character, like in season 2 of Huron and Elias.
How do you say? Yeah.
I'm not totally against that, but I am against combining their abilities. So, you know, because I'm pretty sure that these are 2 separate types of magic. And, you know, so it's just, okay. What was the book series I was just thinking about that did it? Okay. I mean, okay. One everybody knows, just Harry Potter. Okay. I mean, they've taken pretty big books and compressed them to 1.5 hours very successfully. So this to me tells me that you can do that. You can take a large number of words and say what are the important plot points, what are the moments in character development that we cannot skip, and how can we make this work? What combinations can be made? It can be done. But what we saw here was a lot of stuff that just, from my understanding, is just non-existent in the books. So I'm going, why did you waste your time with this when everything in the books is tailored to create a specific climax? Everything, that's what good storytelling is. There should be nothing wasted. You should get to the end of the book and be like, dang, everything.
Of course. Yeah.
It was all leading here. Like the character's personality was tailored for this particular climax, or whatever. And when you have a show that's doing this sort of thing, all these changes in the characters and in the story and in the world building, and we're also seeing stuff that didn't happen, and certain characters are doing things that they weren't doing, and it just tells me you're not leading this story to where it's supposed to go. So it's going to either feel contrived or you're going to have to take it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Though neither one's good.
I think that there are two ways they could have done it better. The first is a adaptation that's as close to the books as is reasonable for the time that they had, which is where you cut large swaths of storyline and you truncate it and get as close as you can to how the books actually are, which I think the Harry Potter films are a good example of having done.
Mm-hmm.
Other good adaptations I've seen of a similar vein where it's close to the books are the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell adaptation by BBC. That's a good fantasy adaptation. I think the old Last Unicorn movie is a really good adaptation of what happens in the book. It's not exact, but it's like if you were just going to watch the film or just watch the TV show, you get the gist of it. Like the book is better, but you get the gist of it, and you can recommend that as like an experience. I've mentioned Watership Down is a great adaptation, the 1978 film of the book. Very close. Some things are different, but it's very close. The other thing that they could have done is to do a retelling of the story, like a retelling of the Wheel of Time. Like this is the, same plot line, but in a different world, like the Portal Stone variation of this, where some things are different and perhaps even dramatically different, but they should have kept the magic the same.
Mm-hmm.
They should have kept the like metaphysical reality of the universe the same. They should have kept the themes the same and the character personalities the same. And then you can have still dramatic differences in plot and where it ends up going and create like a different story that is in the same world that still is fun to watch and very different from the books. And only example I can think of that off the top of my head that I thought was successful, well, I can think of two. One is the Full Metal Alchemist adaptation that was made from the manga before
2003
came out. Yeah, the FMA like original one where they only had some of the story to work with, and they did like their own
example.
ending. And it was good. It was different, but it was like enjoyable. And then Brotherhood came out, and you're like, oh, this is better. But like it was still
really
good.
So
yes.
I've seen both, and I personally think that the 2003 version tells the overarching theme is more complete in this.
It's and concise. It's a more concise story. I think they're both
good. Yeah, they're both great.
But that's a good example of like it's different, because they made up their own story, but it was still like thematically the same and the characters still felt similar. Another example I can think of is the adaptation of The Magicians. So I don't know if you've read Lev Grossman's books, The Magicians, but there are 3 books and they came out with a another kind of CW like story for TV, which I didn't watch all of it because it was much longer than the books, but I watched like the first 4-ish seasons, and it's very different.
I
think it went even further than that. I think it was like 6 seasons. I don't know. I didn't watch the whole thing, but it was different from the books, but in some ways it worked better. Like they took Julia's character and gave her a whole story arc, like in season 1, when she's not in the books at all until I think book 2. So like they did a lot of different things, and it was a dramatic retelling where they took that concept of changing time and then created their own like reimagination. But the reason you can do that with The Magicians is that the magic system is not that important. Even like the whole concept of fillery is like not that important. The main story is about traumatized kids and like wanting to escape to a fantasy world, and that they can't actually escape their problems by escaping to a fantasy world. That's the gist of like what the show is about. And you can do a whole lot of different things with that theme and still get that message across, which I don't know, just as an example, like that would have been a better one for someone like Rafe Judkins to adapt, because it's a lot of drama, a lot of interpersonal drama,
Yeah.
between young people, you know.
Yeah. No, I read the first book of The Magicians, and I watched, I think, like the first 2 seasons. I thought it was hilarious. I thought this was what I was hoping to see. Was, it was basically like, oh, it's Harry Potter, but it's like troubled
Dark,
teens,
yeah,
and they're in college now, and they
yeah,
go to Narnia, and it's
yeah,
yeah,
and it's
to
not
me
great, yeah.
it was a great concept. The genre isn't for me, being that
Mhm.
the angsty sort of teen drama. So I was tired of it after, I think, the first 2 seasons, and I was like, okay, I'm bouncing.
I
But
stopped watching it too, but just in terms of like a different version of that story,
yeah,
like
it
worked
did.
great.
You're exactly right. It did it told a different story. It told it well, though. And this is because I feel like the writers were competent in knowing this is what people wanted to see. They wanted to see these particular. I think that they got stuck in those characters, though. That's
Yeah,
my feeling, is that you have to show some development and growth. And
yeah.
Game of Thrones
When didn't
was,
get so tiring after like 4 seasons of like not improving
yeah,
at all and not ever learning why any of these characters are depressed. I think a little bit,
yeah,
with the exception of Alice. I think for most of the characters, they're like, it's just hard being smart or something, which I
yeah,
felt was a disservice to the theme, because they could have definitely done something interesting with the backstories of all those characters, what their families are like why they're like this, but they didn't. It was kind of it's a shallow Dark Narnia
it's
story.
funny because writers will do this where they create characters and they realize this is a success, or like a scenario, and they're like, all right, we're
Yeah,
going to do this. But the thing is that by staying stuck in that type of story, you wear it out really quickly if
yeah,
you just keep telling it over and over and over again. And this is why I think people really liked Game of Thrones, and I'm talking about just this show. Okay, so I've
yeah.
read the books, and I thought that the first
Speaking of
few
the show, yeah,
seasons, yeah, the first few seasons of the show were great, and especially I think you mentioned it as well, that season one was very
so close to the
so
books.
faithful adaptation. But even the rest of it was still pretty darn faithful. The people enjoyed it because we saw characters going on these journeys. They weren't making the same mistakes over and over and over again. I mean, if they were, they eventually died because of it, or something.
Yeah,
So you saw some progress in these characters. So you felt like you were seeing a new version of your character every single time, and they were doing different things. So that, to me, allows your reader to grow with the characters. And if they're just stuck in the same cycle of the same kind of problems over and over again, it becomes exhausting, and you say, I'm ready for something new. And
yeah.
that's why people get tired of it and leave. So as for the Magicians, that was what hit me. I was waiting for them to grow up, and they like you said, it was just, we don't know
Yeah,
why they're depressed. We don't get any context for this.
yeah,
And it's always relationship drama, and yeah, like, we're too smart for the world, and I can't handle the stress, and my
yeah,
prescription medication, I refuse to take it. Like,
yep.
I
It
was
was
like,
good for a
oh,
couple of seasons and then got a
yes,
little bit like, oh my God.
yeah,
But still, overall a good example of what I'm talking about. Of you could
yeah,
have taken Wheel of Time and done a truncated version of what's in the
yeah,
books, way they very successfully did with Game of Thrones, somewhat did well with Harry Potter. Or you could have done, we're going a different direction with the plot, but we're keeping all of the themes and the characters and the general world the same.
yeah,
But they didn't do either of those things. Instead, they are rehashing everything, and in my opinion, making the wrong things the priority, like
yeah,
the Aes Sedai politics, which honestly isn't that interesting even in the books, is like
yeah.
the main part of the story.
Well,
in,
because they're trying to
in
do
this
Game of
retelling.
Thrones, I think, like what you're saying. They were,
Yeah, but
because
not well, because it
I
feels much more
know,
high school drama than it does real politics.
and
Like
it's
you
so
don't really get a
stagnant.
sense of,
We're
yeah,
not seeing what are the results of this drama. We should see real world effects from what
yes.
we're seeing happen in the tower, and that's not happening at all. I mean, yeah, like, it's kids, it's kids between classes, having their drama. So it's not good.
So let's dig into some of the specifics, like the specific elements of story when it
Okay.
comes to telling a story and what the show is doing that's different from the book. So how many elements of story there are kind of differ depending on what academic source you are consulting. But I learned that it is primarily setting, character, plot, theme, and sometimes conflict. You can add things to that like mood or point of view, or some other
I thought you nailed it. When I saw your list, I was like, yeah, this is it.
The ones I always go to are setting, character, plot, theme, and conflict. I think that they have mucked up all of these. I would have preferred if they just changed plot. But let's maybe just chat a little bit about how they are doing it differently.
Okay.
Let's start with setting, because I feel like that is a big one. So setting is, what is this world? When is this world? How are the both visual and, developments within the story capturing this place and time?
So
what are your thoughts?
if we're going to include world building elements, I mean, I think we kind of discussed this, but just starting off, first of all, with having something that is not the same as the books. Now, okay, we're going to talk about just the show or in relation to the books.
I think in relation to the books, but you could start with just the show, and then I can comment on how this is different in the books, because I've read all the books and you've only read a couple.
So just starting out with our prologue and Moraine basically saying that the men are the ones who caused this.
They make it filthy.
Yes, they make it filthy.
Arrogance.
And then to call them arrogant, I was going,
yeah.
Okay, we're seeing a magic different. We're changing the magic. We're changing the lore, the history of this world, and we're changing the character, because I never once got the impression that she felt like men are arrogant. Like, just I was like, this is a bad taste right away. So that was that. So as far as world building goes, they came out of the gates on a sour note. As far as visual representation, I think I mentioned it while we were recording. My mother watched this before me, and she said, I don't know where any of these people are. I was like, I don't either. And here's the thing, we can compare this to Game of Thrones, because this was supposed to be Amazon's answer to Game of Thrones. Right. And one thing about Game of Thrones is you always knew where everything was because of the intro.
That intro.
Yes. And I know that seems like, oh, well, we can't have a Game of Thrones intro for everything. No, but you can do what like Shadow and Bone did. Shadow and Bone, which I don't think it's a perfect show. I don't think it's a great show even, but it's a good show. Well, it's okay. And one thing that they did when they released season 2 was they realized that people had no way to figure out where people were. So they went back into season 1 and they inserted transitions using a map. So you could see that now we're jumping back to here. And suddenly you're oriented, like, now I know where everybody is. That would be one thing that would be very nice to do.
The Witcher could use that too. I don't want to get off topic, but
I haven't watched The Witcher. Honestly, I watched season 1 because my sister loves it. She loves the books, and she loved the first season, and she's like, you got to watch it. And I was like, no. I love Henry Cavill, but I didn't know what was going on, and I was kind of like, whatever. Anyways, let's get back to Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time.
So that was one thing. Not knowing where people are, I think, is important. Also, having something to tell us differences in the locations that they are at. So, okay, as far as I can tell, the architecture is the biggest difference between Tarvalon and the Two Rivers. And okay, you know what the standout town was it's a town that doesn't exist in the books really, but some of the events that happen there sort of do happen. The mining town, what did they call it?
I don't remember what they called it. Like, it was like something spring or yeah.
In the books I think it was supposed to be Four Kings or something, right?
I'm not sure.
It's a bunch of places.
What happens in the show is exactly what happens in the books. It might be Barrelon, it might be Four Kings, it might be some other.
That was the most unique setting because everybody there looked grungy, like they just climbed out of the ground, right?
Right.
But you want to do things to tell you this is a unique, different culture. You want to show it in the mannerisms of the people. You want to show it in their clothing, in their architecture, in how they, well, I said mannerisms. I guess that could count as social dynamics. And you do also want to do this with how the people look. And this is one thing that did bug me in the book was Rand did stand out in his town.
Yeah.
And I'm going, I don't feel like he stood out. But then again, that would have given away that he's somebody different from everybody else in this
Well,
town. And
because they
yeah,
focused on this, like, it's a mystery, like him
yeah,
standing out wouldn't have worked. But from like even like farther back view, I think the most critical thing about the setting for the Wheel of Time is that this is a world with reincarnation that everyone understands to be real. It's not just a belief. Like, everyone knows that reincarnation is a thing. The creator creates worlds and then disappears, and the wheel and the pattern and the age lace are the things that replace religion within this world. They tried to show that in the TV show in a way that I personally didn't like. Some people liked it. I did not like it. Whereas in the first season, everyone looks like they're wearing post-apocalyptic clothing. Like, the breaking of the world happened a few decades ago, and we're all piecing together outfits from like an amalgamation of eras. This is in the first season specifically.
I'm
And
thinking
like
of
in the Two
Rand's
Rivers,
Sherpa outfit that he
yes,
wore.
like it looks like it came from like H&M or something, and
Yes.
Grain's wearing like a plaid skirt and like a blouse, and like everyone just kind of looks like they're, you know, putting together clothes that could come from anywhere, and it's all a little bit like not raggedy, but like, you know, things, the world was broken and we're doing the best we can. The problem with that is that in the books, at least, the breaking of the world happened like 3,000
Yeah.
years ago, not 30 years ago. So,
Yeah.
and even when they're like, I don't know if you remember this, the scene where they're like riding their horses, I think on the way to Shadar-Logoth, it might be after, they show like these skyscrapers covered in moss and things. That doesn't not work for me. Like, it's trying to show like, oh, this used to be what the world looked like, but over 3,000 years there would be nothing left of those types of buildings. Like, you wouldn't see anything.
It always bugs me when in fantasy they say it's been like, okay, Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn. I haven't read a whole lot of Brandon Sanderson. I have a lot of respect for him as a lecturer, and I enjoy.
Setting's not his greatest thing, if that's what you're going to say.
What was it? Setting
is not his strongest element.
I know a lot of people really love his world building.
His world building is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, like, in terms of like what the city looks like and where people are standing. Yeah. There's a lot of like white space in the way that he writes, and it's hard to like visualize the details of the space that you're occupying.
I pick up on that. I didn't read his work critically. I read it for pleasure, which means that I don't even think about it. I just let it happen, you know, just sit back and, you know, let the force flow. But so, oh shoot, what was I going to say about him? What we were just talking about.
I was talking about the skyscrapers being covered with moss and how that would not ever, like, it would go down to nothing over 3,000
years. The 1,000-year thing. Okay, yeah, he was talking about things that happened like 1,000 years ago. I'm like, well, okay, let's look at our experience with 1,000 years passage of time, assuming that these are humans in this other world. You know, they don't live for 500 years each. They live for the standard like 75 to 85 years.
Right.
Most of us 1,000 years ago, like, we look back at that what was going on 1,000 years ago. It looked very different from here. Fashions were very different. But the thing is you just have to realize what sort of stuff happens over 1,000 years. Like, empires rise and fall, cultures rise and fall. And so, like, when you're talking about setting and fashion, people who live in a certain setting would have developed their own fashion, and it wouldn't be a mishmash anymore. It would be, this is a 1,000-year-old developed, this is our stage of fashion at this point.
And that's how Robert Jordan writes it. And he makes every single culture very specific. Own, and they're patterned after like real European cultures, like kind of like 17th, 18th century, just in different locations. But in the TV show, at least in that first season, it's like the Aes Sedai all wear jewel colors and everyone else is like looking like they're refugees from a post-apocalyptic world. And the costume design, like, if you were a costume designer and you were told this is post-apocalyptic Earth, those costumes look great. I think that that's what they were told, and that's what they ran with. And then in season 2, they got a different note of, actually, this is supposed to be 17th, 18th century fashions. And you start seeing more lace and more embroidery and more like
that party
French
that they were
inspirations and Kyrie. And this is Versailles suddenly. So like, I think
what century did we jump into all of a sudden?
Yes, but like season 2 looks closer to the books in costume, but compared to season 1, feels very like this is not the same world even.
Yeah.
And lots of people have commented on the Two Rivers looking like a metropolis, like a small metropolis, but just there were so many different types of people like living in this one area.
Yeah.
Where, you know, they have some cultures that are similar, but it just felt like this is at the center, like between lots of trade or something for like
It
all of
didn't
these.
look very
It
different
didn't
from
look
any.
isolated.
Yeah, it didn't look different from the other little towns that they were coming across, apart from the grunge town. But I mean, I feel like that's like that
Yeah,
was
the mining town. Yeah.
hooray, well done. You made a town that looked like none of the others.
Unique. Yes.
But yeah, you really want to do this. You want to give your audience a sense of location, because you're not taking the time that they're taking in the books to like, okay, our point of view character is noticing the differences and pointing them out to the reader. If you're not going to do that in the show, you have to just visually, there it is, so that when we sit down and watch, we have that experience of, this place is different.
And there's so much description in the books. Like people complain about how much description of like the clothes and things that there are in the books. And that's like a
I've heard that.
it's a matter of taste, but you know, dresses slashed with color, what does that mean? But I just like there's things that are in the books that are so well done in terms of helping to craft a setting. Why would you want to recreate all of that for your TV show and make it so hard on yourself to like reinvent entire worlds and customs and cultures and things, not drawing from the books? Like you mentioned, the Two Rivers and Tarvalon don't seem like that different of places, really. They have kind of like hut houses versus it looks a little bit more like Florence, Italy or something in Tarvalon. Like
it wasn't even so much the
it
was just the architecture that seemed different. Everything else, the people looked the same. I'm as far as I could tell, the fashions were pretty much the same, just a little bit more like metallic stuff would be on the clothes. I thought this was supposed to take like months to get to. Apparently it's like, okay, so I was trying to figure out how long has it been
God, the traveling
since they left the Two Rivers. And I'm going, it's been a year now. Okay, but they spent 6 months getting from the climax of episode 8 to the beginning of season 2, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be six. They said 5 months at the tower, but at one point they said 6 months since the eye. So they spent
a whole year. I think it's a whole year because Perrin
it's a year from the Two Rivers.
Yeah, from the Two Rivers.
So that means that they spent 6 months getting from the Two Rivers to Tarvalon, but we saw pretty much, it looked like a couple of weeks, maybe.
Yeah, they just skipped
then 1 month, and like, okay, now 1 month later they're at Tarvalon, and I'm going, I'm seeing more like 7, 8, maybe 9 months maximum of time passage, but now they're saying it's been a year. Ugh. But
you can do that in the later books when they have different ways of getting around that are faster. But like in those first books, the scope of what we call Randland is kind of useful for understanding like how many countries they are and how and like what the mission is for the Dragon Reborn of like getting all of these different cultures to prepare for the last battle. You get that sense of time and space with how far it takes them to travel just to Camelin in the books.
Yeah,
that's all in the same country, and then they jump to they jump to Faldara using the Waygate. And in the TV show, they travel all the way across the country to where Tarvalon is, but it feels like you don't pass any other cultures. There's no like other than the traveling people a little bit, which is kind of like its own thing. Like I don't think that it was showing the scope of the world. And I think that was the same problem that, well, one of the many problems that those end seasons for Game of Thrones ran into, where it just stopped, like it started like skipping the traveling and everything just felt like,
where are you?
Compressed and
like,
well,
they
like
have
way
dragons,
too rapid.
they can fly.
Yeah.
And so the problem with this being so far apart, like it's supposed to be far apart, we're supposed to believe that these places are very distant from each other, is okay. If you're going to say, well, the reason why, you have this mishmash of culture is because, they've been here for so long. I'm like, okay, well, then this means that travel is very easy. They should be able to travel long distances very easy. That is how cultures become more potent, is isolation. So the more
Yeah.
isolated, the more potent your culture is going to be, and the more removed from the next culture it's going to
Yep.
feel.
And that's a
And
theme in the books because all of those cultures are very different.
yes.
And as you keep reading, you'll start to see when Rand becomes the Dragon Reborn, all these cultures start to mix together in ways that they were not prepared for. And that's actually like plays out in the story.
That's going to be some
It's really
drama.
interesting.
See,
Yeah.
that will be so interesting to see, but we're going to get to this point in the show and be like, but we didn't see these differences. So when we get to this, it's going to feel like, by the way, before we get into this next scene, we want you to know that all of these cultures, they're very different from each other in even the tiniest little ways. You're going to see some big differences, but now we're putting them in the same room. Isn't that exciting? And we're going to be like,
I mean, they do it a little bit, and I'm seeing it better in season 2. So season 1, I thought didn't manage setting well at all. Season 2, I think they got some new notes. The costume designers got some new notes, and Kyrian feels a bit more like France, and Eridamon feels a bit more. I'm not actually sure what it's based off of, like Morocco or something, but like it's a little bit, it has like its own flavor that's different than some of the other places we've seen. I would say Faldara felt a little bit different even in season 1, but like in a not very sculpted way. And those scenes are just so frustrating because what they did to Aljamar as a character was abominable to me.
I know. I
had time watching anything happening in Faldara.
I really was so upset about. So you say it's Aljamar, or Algamar,
or Algamar.
One of those.
Yeah. No one agrees on how things are pronounced.
I don't know why they made him the way he was. I really can't see the point in having made him that way, because the only thing I can see is, all right, we need him to be opposition to Moiraine, so she can't do the thing that she needs to do because of him. But he wasn't ever in the way. He was just a jerk.
It was completely unnecessary. He could have been welcoming and honorable to Moiraine, and so excited to see Lan as a Borderlander return to his kingdoms, and all of the, rolling out the red carpet for them. All the girls get fancy dresses like they do in the books. That all could have been the same, and it wouldn't have changed anything in that, except that you would have cared more when he died.
Yes.
What happens in the show. Yeah.
And think about how much more conflict would that have added for our heroine, Moiraine, who is the heroine in the show.
She feels bad, right?
She should feel bad about, I'm so sorry, I can't help you. I know you're so happy to see me, but I've got something more important to do. And they just didn't use, like, the changes that they made would have created opportunity to make conflict, but they didn't use that change to make the conflict that they had the opportunity to make, and then they missed out on conflict that already existed. Oh my gosh,
it just seems like there's like this desire to make every character disagreeable with every other character in every scene.
I cannot stand this. I can't,
like, every single time. Like, every character hates every other character, except I guess Elaine and Egwene kind of get along in season 2, but like every other time.
But that's just season 2. I know that they actually, from what I hear, okay, I don't say I know this, but I was told by several commenters that they started filming season 2 before season 1 was released.
That's what I heard too.
Somebody must have told somebody that you can't have every character be disagreeable like this, because yes, Elaine, I'm liking her so much. I'm like, she's my favorite character now.
I think Elaine and Lanfear and Loyal, because he's so nice, but he doesn't do anything. My problem with Loyal in the TV show is like the whole purpose of him as a character was taken away.
Yes.
Yeah, with the Waygates not mattering, and never go to a steading. They don't talk about anything related to that. The Green Man's not in it, none of that. So it's all useless even having him around, other than to be like a nice character, because most of the characters are not nice.
Then he's though introduced so late in the story, so it's like too late. I already hate everybody. But I think that what happened here is you have a misunderstanding of this concept that there needs to be conflict all the time, and like character conflict. You don't have to have conflict between your characters, but they can still have conflict. Like, let's even just take the changes they made to Perrin.
We're on characters now, by the way, for the audience.
Okay.
I think now we're on characters. Let's talk about Perrin.
I know a lot of people have problems with, like, oh, they only gave him a wife to kill her, the fridging, which is that's apparent. So I got my degree back in early, like 2001, 2002. And that's when I learned all of my terminology for writing and editing. And so fridging is new to me, but I get it. And I'm not against it if that is going to be a major point of drama, because this is sort of like, oh, well, why are you writing your story about the guy? I don't know who said this. Why are you writing your story about the guy who won the lottery? Like, it's so unlikely that, just this random character wins the lottery. I'm like, well, because that's how it happens, that we're not telling a story about some random guy whose neighbor won the lottery, although that could be an interesting story. But, we're following Perrin because he killed his wife accidentally. Then that should be like a huge point in his character, is him dealing with that trauma and figuring out how to get over it, and probably maybe never get over it, which I think is more realistic. But they didn't do it. I mean, they had him sort of, we could see that he was thinking about something related to this, but then you get to season 2 and he's putting his wedding ring on the raft to send it away. So it's been a year and he's over it. And I'm like,
it'd be one thing if she died in the Trolloc attack, but it's another that he murdered her. Like, those are different. Like, those are different things. Like, Perrin needs to be in therapy for 20 years. Like, this is not a.
The only moment I can think of that was directly related to him dealing with his trauma related to his wife was when he was in the tent with Egwene
by the White Cloaks, and felt he deserved to be,
and felt that he deserved to die. And I'm like, so that was his change point, was her just saying, "You're gonna get over it someday," and then poof, he's over it.
I'm good with it now.
That's so unsatisfying. When this was his defining moment in episode 1, was you killed your wife, and then they did nothing with it. It's so unsatisfying.
I feel like there's this desire in the writers for this show that characters can only be interesting if they have tragic backstories. And so they're giving all the characters tragic backstories. I personally disagree with that. And I don't think that's what makes the characters in the books interesting.
Because they don't have tragic backstories in the books.
No,
and they're still interesting.
He had a pretty nice childhood. Like, his very loving father, he was a shepherd. He had lived in a nice, safe town. He had a sweet girlfriend that he was, thought he was going to get married to. Like, his life was okay before all
drama
happened.
The drama there. And this is actually something, so I study, I'm a weirdo. Okay, I will take characters and why is this character likable when everybody says they're tired of this kind of character, and like what is it? And I'll dissect them. I'm like the surgeon that's like, wait, I'm not done with this autopsy. But I think that people really love to watch an innocent, good character, because we all, in our own heads, even if we're doing things that are bad, we're doing them because they're good for us, or because we think that they're good, right?
Everyone thinks that they're the hero of their own story.
So when we watch somebody who is genuinely good and we go, that's a good person, they had this lovely, pure life, and now they're thrown into a gray world and they have to deal with the gray world. That's so interesting. I think people love to watch this happen because we go, dang, I don't know what I would do in that situation. Or I can see why they made this choice. I don't agree that it was the best choice, but I see why they did it. There's something that people are innately drawn to in this kind of story, watching innocence be slowly beaten down or slowly
going
attacked.
From immaturity to maturity, trying to think,
not
going
even
with the easy life to I can
you go
things and fight monsters and succeed against obstacles. Like, that's inspiring for other people to observe. And if you do have a tragic backstory, I think there's definitely a way to spin that of people with tragic backstories becoming better people or growing as people or becoming separating themselves from the traumatic circumstances that result in this, less than idyllic life. Like, that can be fun to watch too. But in the TV show, it's like all the characters are just sad because, and then none of them are really growing in a way that makes sense. So Perrin has murdered his wife, and even without that, they had this very unnecessary drama with him and Rand and Egwene, which felt very thrown in there for me in the second to last episode, and then just kind of disappeared in subsequent,
the very next episode it was done.
It's gone. It's like, because
they had to talk. They had to talk about it.
Well, some of them talked, some of them didn't.
Two of
but
them,
everyone read the script.
But somehow Perrin knew what was going on
because he read the script.
Obviously, he must know. Oh my gosh, that happened so many times in season 1 where I was like, how does this character know what happened here?
But anyway, so Rand obviously is kind of a jerk in the TV show. In the books, he's not. And this is a missed opportunity. Rand is such a sweetheart in the early books. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but part of the story is about the pressure that like what the pressure of being the Dragon Reborn turns him into. And so
Okay.
it's a very like it's a very good example of what you were describing, of people who come from, simpler
Innocence.
backgrounds being thrown into, okay, now you're the savior of the world and have to fight the Dark One and ally all the peoples and like bring all of these disparate cultures that don't want to work together and like do all of these things. And
And
you
I
will
think I'm
get,
seeing that in book 3.
yes,
I'm only on chapter 7, and
yeah,
it had that moment in the camp where the pressure's too much. He loses it, and some stuff happens. There's like almost an avalanche, and
so he runs away. Yeah.
yeah, well, yes, that happens too. That happens, and then later he runs away. So, but
Funny.
yeah, and you can see that, yeah, the pressure is getting to him, and he's starting to lash out, but he doesn't like that he's lashing out.
Yes.
And that's another thing that I don't like about what's going on in the show with the characters, is when they are doing bad things, they don't seem to feel bad about it later.
There's no moral compass. Like Rand
No.
literally attacks that guy in the street and like maims him in the city of Kyrian. And we're
Yes.
supposed to think that's okay because he was kind of a dick as a coworker. Like, yeah.
Or like how
like
Nynaeve
that
is behaving. She's
Yes!
not getting,
Oh,
there are no
God, she's
consequences for
awful.
her. That's why, okay, so I haven't gotten to this part, my reviews yet, but like I've said, I've watched season 2. I was so happy to watch Leandrin kick her ass.
Like you start
yes!
to root for the villains. Like, oh my God, thank God. Someone has like
great.
awareness.
I was like, this lady, this Red Aja lady, who I thought was a villain in season 1, she is the medicine that Nynaeve needs, because she doesn't put up with her BS. She just ignores all of the rudeness. Like nothing affects her. And when Nynaeve threatens her, rather than her like, okay, we'll just magic like landed in the previous one. She's like, it's not an offer, it's a threat, or whatever the hell she said. And then he lets her go. And I'm going like, oh God, you just like, she didn't learn anything. Okay. Anyway, but so she does the same thing in episode 1 and threatens Leandrin, like, if you don't let me go right this minute. I'm like, you don't let her go, what are you gonna do? Yeah. But she does let her go, and I was like, oh man. But then she's like, aha, I've shielded you. And I was like, yes. You didn't let her go. You showed her that it can get worse.
Nynaeve in the show is so insufferable. Like all of the things that she's doing, all the way up until this most recent episode, even like she's just awful. In the books, Nynaeve is sometimes like that. Like she's, she thinks she's smarter than she is. She's a prickled burr in her because Moraine's talking down to her, and
but a lot of the time she is right.
Yes, a lot of times that she is right.
They're just making her wrong.
She's never right. And in the books, like her obstinance serves a purpose, because when she's on her own, she's actually very effective. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but at the end of the Great Hunt, Nynaeve is like running that show. Like she's the one that like solves the problems, gets Elaine on board, like finds Min, like comes up with the plan. Like she does everything.
This time they gave the smarts to Elaine. They had I was like, why did you make this change? You
even a main character, yet we just let her.
Nynaeve is supposed to be a main character, and instead of having her take, like in the book, take charge. She's the one who comes up with a plan. She's the one who goes in and does the thing. She's the one who rescues Egwene. We haven't gotten to her rescue yet, have we? No, we haven't. I'm going, why would you take all of that and give it to Elaine?
A side character at this point.
Yes. Yeah. And maybe they're like, we're gonna shift gears, we're gonna downplay.
She does become a main character, but like we have time to build her. You don't have to give her all the glow moments. Like
either way, they've
end of the season.
It seems like they've gone out of their way to make Nynaeve stupid, because
obstinate and difficult. Like just
the obstinate and difficult I could deal with if she wasn't so dumb.
So stupid. Yeah.
Because if she's obstinate but she's right most of the time, you can go, I can get behind this. Like I can see, like, I'm frustrated because people don't believe me, and what do you know? They should have done the thing that I said we should do because it would have gone better. But that's not what's happening.
She's and there's a nice. I'm just remembering too, like there's a nice reason for why Nynaeve is annoying sometimes in the books, and that's because of her block. So she is only able to channel when she's angry, which means that she is actively making herself angry a lot, like even when she doesn't need to be. And in the show,
instinctively,
like she's aware that she can't channel unless
this reasoning hasn't been made. I don't think it's been made explicit yet, or if it has, I heard it in the comments before, and I kind of like, oh, I don't have to pay attention to this part because I heard it already.
It's not really a spoiler because they'll go into it very shortly. But she in order to channel, she has to be furious. So she actually like revs herself up in the books to like
I get
feel
that.
mad enough to be able to channel. And then later in the story, she becomes like more tolerable. But in
Okay.
the show, she's just obstinate to be obstinate, and there's no reason
Yeah.
for it. They don't explain what her struggles are with channeling other than that they say she's afraid, which is to me less interesting because I don't know how, like, it's like, you know, she only channels when she's like really upset. So like a lot of like
Yeah.
terrible things happen to her, and then she's just like releasing power everywhere, as opposed to in a very calculated manner, like I need this certain emotional zone to be able to do this specific thing that I want to do.
The problem with doing this without addressing what the real reason is, without being like, this is why you can't channel, is that it feels like Deus Ex Machina. And I
Yes.
mentioned this in my last episode
When we
review,
need
is
it,
that
when she needs to be amazing, she'll
Yeah.
become Super Saiyan and everything is fixed.
yes, Super Saiyan, yeah. It'll just happen because, and in any time that we get into a bad situation, I'm just going to be like, well, all I got to do is make Nynaeve think that she's dying or everybody else around her is
Yes.
dying, and she'll save everybody.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
so unsatisfying because you know what's going to happen. So
Yeah. Or like that terrible scene at the end of the last season when Egwene heals Nynaeve with her tears. Like that was so frustrating to me for a
was it her tears?
System. No, I don't know.
Okay,
There was no
but
explanation for how she was able to channel in
it
that
looked like
moment
she
to
tried
save
to
anyone.
channel, and then
She has no skill.
She realized I can't, and she gave up and just started like crying, and that's when it happened.
And then it worked. That's why I said she healed her with her tears.
Like, so you weren't trying to channel, but channeling happened, but it wasn't like a stress moment.
Yeah. When you're at your most, you know, erratic and not able to concentrate, that's when you're the strongest. And that flies in the face of everything we know about Aes Sedai in the books when they are serene and controlled. Like you learn later they're a little bit less serene and controlled than they let on, but like there's an aspect of formality and regalness to the way the Aes Sedai are and are perceived. And in the show, it's like they're this erratic, crazy, immature, like backstabbing, just like horrible.
Well, I don't see the point of having the White Tower if it seemed, because this is the impression that I get. If I had not read the books and I'm only watching the show, I'd be like, okay, so here's how channeling works. It works like a reflexive instinct that you don't know. It's a reflex you don't know you have. It's just instinctual in you, because that's how Moraine even explains it to Rand, right? And I'm going, it seems to be like that with the women too, because it's just a reflex. You can't control it. So why does the White Tower exist if it's a reflex and it'll just happen the way you want? It doesn't make any sense to me why that would exist. You don't need to learn how to channel. It'll just happen when it needs to happen. And that's a very bad way to tell your story, because it just makes everything feel contrived.
It may be that they're pulling from the concept in the books that the stronger you are with the power, the more you can do things instinctually. Like there are times in the books when Rand will figure out how to do something just because he's very, very powerful. It's a little bit of a fudge on the on the part of Robert Jordan. And Nynaeve does the same thing. Like when she's in her power, she will occasionally like have an ingenious moment where she just figures something out the way like really good musicians can just play music. But
this was an opportunity for the show to improve upon that, to say, you know what, we're going to make
it.
Yeah.
The more powerful you are, the more instinctually you can do things. Like, sure, I will buy that like as an explanation. But the way it is now, it just feels, everything just feels very random.
Yeah.
Like anything.
It's terrible. Oh my gosh. It's that the ending of season 1 should go down in history as this is what film students should study and figure. Don't do this. Just don't do this.
You may not be aware of this because you didn't watch the show as it was airing last 2 years ago. But they ran into problems with COVID for those last couple episodes. However, I don't think that the problems with COVID were as core to the challenges as they have let on. There might have needed to be some rewrites, and it might have been that Rafe Judkins did those rewrites alone with no help because of
that's
COVID.
why we got what we got.
You know, email doesn't exist and you can't share files with anyone to review them or whatever when you're filming on location. I don't know what the explanations are, but some of those things may have been impacted, but not to the degree that
I don't buy COVID as an excuse at all, because number one, this is Amazon. They have money. No, we had limits. Really? You had limits, Amazon? Yeah. I don't believe that for a second. So I like I said, I haven't worked in Hollywood, but I have worked in the film industry in Arizona. Oh my gosh, it's so rinky dink and small compared to like this kind of a big production, right? But we filmed 90% of a $10,000 production. It was actually very well done. We had the special effects guy was helping us with it and everything. And we had to pause for a couple of months because we ran out of money and needed it for a scene that we had to film. And during those couple of months, we raised the money, did a great job, but our lead actor decided, I want all that money now. So we had to reshoot the entire film, the entire thing with a new actor in there.
Wow.
So, I mean, 90%
can be done, what you're saying.
it can be done. If a
Barney Harris was not the
little,
reason that Matt's character is so messed up. I don't think so either.
If we can do it, and we had a lot of special effects shots, it was a steampunk film. If we can do it, they can do it. I mean, even if the whole Matt thing not going with them to the finale, I'm sorry, Amazon, you recast that kid right away. You get somebody in there, and even if you recast again for season 2, just get somebody in there and do not change the story, because
I'm not even convinced that in the original script that Matt was supposed to go. Like,
really?
I'm not convinced. I don't know, but it does seem like there's like a contrivance to work out some character story with Min and Ishamael, which
maybe
I don't know. I
don't know what the hell they're doing with Min.
I don't know where it's going to go, because we only have one episode left, and that whole storyline feels the most underdeveloped and like nonsensical. So it could be a location focused thing, but I'm not sure.
The more I thought about it, the more I felt like, remember the conversation that Matt or Perrin has with Pat and Fane? That was supposed to be Matt. Ooh, why would it be Perrin? Perrin had no relationship that we saw with Pat and Fane. But it should have been Matt. Well, I'm just talking about the show. It should have been Matt, because Matt was the one who talked to Pat and Fane. He was the only one who talked to Pat and Fane.
There's that connection with the dagger between them to make Pat and Fane Matt's antagonist. But if you've noticed, Pat and Fane has disappeared from the TV show story completely in season 2. So if they were building up to something with him, I don't know what it is, because he's basically gone. We saw him saunter down the street to hand the Horn of Valier to Turok, and we haven't seen him do anything else.
Is he still hanging out there? Like, is he with the Shan-Chan? It seemed to me like he's hanging out with the Shan-Chan. I don't know what he's doing with them.
I don't know. Because in the books, Pat and Fane is like the main villain of book 2, and Ishamael's like in it, but not to the degree that Pat and Fane is. Like,
they're trying to make Ishamael the main baddie, and because I feel like they're trying to jump ahead and say, like, because I think from what I have heard, because I try not to get spoilers, but sometimes I'm reading comments and I'm like, oh shoot, that was a spoiler. But Ishamael is the main baddie for Rand, essentially. He's like the main antagonist. You don't have to give away anything. That's what I have heard. So I think that they're building him up because they need him to be the big bad guy that we're all rooting against. But Pat and Fane, I feel like there's something important about him, and if you want him to have a good payoff at the end, you can't neglect him completely like this.
I don't want to spoil the books for you or get too far into what could or should be, but I would say that Pat and Fane in the books is a main antagonist through book 4, and then he kind of falls off after that. He shows up again like in book 7, but he's not the main antagonist for like most of the back end of the series. He's kind of around, but he's not like the focus. At that point, at a certain point, the Forsaken become more bigger
prominent.
For Rand than Pat and Fane, because it's doing that thing that you do in a series where like the bad guy in the first book has to be smaller than the bad guy in the second book, and then has to like get a little bit ramped up with each book, so it doesn't feel like a letdown from the previous book. So in book 2, Pat and Fane is the bad guy because Rand is still a untrained shepherd from a village who's just trying to look out for his friends. In later books, he's a very different space. So
it's interesting to me that people so writing in, I guess I wouldn't say this about today, but when I was watching Game of Thrones as it was coming out, I was going, dang, we have matured in writing for TV so much. And one of the things that I felt like was really well understood in there is that you don't have to have your main villain be the White Walkers, right? It
Right.
can be somebody who's not as scary as the White Walkers, despite us seeing how terrifying they are. We can have our main villain, our season finale, be somebody smaller, but it's more personal. It's a more personal battle. Yes. And so, like, okay, Harry Potter's a good example of this. Voldemort was for book 1. Voldemort was for book 2. Who was it for book 3? It was not Voldemort. It was, oh my gosh, what the heck's his name? It's the mouse, the guy who turned into the mouse.
Peter Pettigrew.
Peter Pettigrew. I mean, that's a big step down, but it meant more because he's the man who betrayed Harry's parents and got them killed. So, and you know, yeah.
Okay. But the Harry Potter books actually are fantastically structured. Like if you want to talk about book structure and how you keep a similar story interesting with each installment, like they're very well done. That would be a totally separate video. But the thing with conflict, because we're in our last section now. We'll skip plot. We're in conflict.
I think that plot and character are so hand in hand that it's hard to separate the two.
Yeah. Conflict, though, the protagonist wants something. The antagonist is in the way of what it is the protagonist wants. Like that is the essential like building blocks of telling a story. And antagonists don't have to be people. They can be an environment. They can be like an interpersonal conflict, even when you have like man against himself as your structure. There's a lot of like different types of antagonists that work really well in building and telling a story. In the Wheel of Time, they're setting up Ishamael to be the antagonist to Rand. But the problem is that I don't know what the characters want, because Rand as a protagonist doesn't seem to be trying to do anything except avoid Aes Sedai and not go mad. Like it's kind of accurate to where he is in the book too, except that in the book he had more agency where he was trying to help his friend survive this, you know,
he was trying to
the dagger
for the
was
horn
stolen.
too.
And get the horn back, right? So he was trying to achieve something. In the TV show, he just seems to be avoiding things, which is not interesting from like a character that you root for.
It can be interesting if you have a proactive antagonist. And so my first note on episode 1 was that, oh, okay, I see what they wanted to do. They just didn't do it, which is you start out your story from the perspective of the villains. And the villains are discussing what they're going to do. We have a plan. It's very specific. We're going to do this. And they don't even have to reveal what it is, which is in the book. That's exactly what happens. You don't know what the plan is. You just know it involves the 3 boys and there's a lot of different moving parts because lots of people are being told to do things and you don't know what it is. Some of them are very excited about what they're going to do. And it makes you anxious for your protagonist because you can take a breath as a writer at that point. You can be like, okay, now I can have my protagonist just avoiding things, but it will feel like they're in danger because we will see evidence of the bad guys coming after them.
The shadowy movement of people coming after them or pushing them in a certain direction that you don't trust.
But they didn't do that in the show. They actually started to. Somebody says, "Oh, you want us to kill Rand?" And you know what the guy said? The Ishamael said, he's like, "Nah. You know, you don't have to. He'll eventually turn, you know, he can be turned to my side and that can be good, you know, and that can happen, you know, in this age or another." And I'm going,
or another.
Like, okay. So if I was one
there's no urgency to any of this that's happening.
Yes. Yeah. Like if I was one of the Dark Friends, I would be like,
all right, well, not then. Yeah.
So long. I'm headed
I'll just sit here and twiddle my thumbs.
Yes. Yeah. You don't have to do anything. So there's no sense of the bad guys coming after Rand. It's just like the bad guys they're stewing, but they're not stewing anything except broth. You know, it's just like this.
I still don't know what Ishamael's plan is in the TV show. I have an inkling of how it's going to wrap up in this final episode, but I'm not 100% sure because of just things that this show has done in the past. What are your thoughts?
They have discussed the whole proclaiming yourself in
above Tommen's head,
yes, and then the whole battle in the sky. Like they have said those specific things. Yes. So I'm like, okay. So
and they use the word he, which I think was fun because this whole show has been talking about how the Dragon Reborn could be a girl, and then they're like, here's pieces of the prophecy, and he will be above Tommen's head. Like, okay.
That was another thing in the in the prologue of season 1, episode 1, was that they said that Rand is not yet the dragon. And I'm like, wait, so he might not become the dragon? Like, that's what you're saying? Like, the one who might not be, it was something like along those lines. And I'm going, don't do this. Don't. And they never do. They never play that out, that he might not become the dragon. It's like, no, you're the dragon. Like, so why did you say that? Anyway, okay. But
The
anyway.
show does that constantly where it's like, it might be this or it might be this. Or we might just like forget we ever had that is it or conversation. Like it does that constantly with all kinds of things. But anyway, you were saying.
Well, oh yeah. So what are they going to do with the finale? I mean, okay, so Moraine is exactly kind of where she was at this point, except that she's not really in this part of the book. So
Yeah, she's not in the books in The Great Hunt at all. Although I think if they were going to do like a closer adaptation, they had replaced Varen with Moraine for this whole journey west to Falm. That would have been a perfectly fine way to keep Rosamund Pike as a prominent character.
Yeah,
in
that
season.
really would have been fine.
It's easier, just simpler. You can still introduce Varen and have her do some stuff in the tower like she does in this season, but like I don't know. Anyway, that's a little off topic. What interests before we get into like the last episode, what do you think of Lanfear as a character in the TV show compared to the books?
Okay, so the changes that they have made to her personality, I think make a little bit more sense because of the changes in personality they made to Rand and the other characters.
Yeah.
Like, think about this. She seemed to be nobility in the book. She seemed to be like a researcher, or like she studied like she knew a lot of things, especially about this yeah. And so Rand felt like here's somebody who's very experienced with the world, but she's also gorgeous, and he's an innocent and he's a teenager, and so he's thinking not with his head, but you know, with his hormones and other things. And that's believable, right? But okay, in the show, Rand is far more mature, right? He's not innocent, especially in a sexual respect.
Right.
So
we have
to elevate her. Then she can't just be regal and beautiful. She has to be very she has to break the norms in what Rand would expect in a sexual relationship, because that's the next level up, right? So they've done, I think, with her a lot of the things that, I mean, to me it somewhat makes sense. I don't like it, but they did it. But some things that don't make sense is that she like runs this little inn, and yet she's part of upper class society somehow.
And no one questions that. Like, how did you get these invitations? Where did you get these nice clothes? Like, who are you? I really hated they didn't show her introduced. Like, I am fine.
So bad.
I am fine with the character changes. I've said in another video that I think they're combining her character with another one of the Forsaken because they're not going to have all of them in the TV show, which I think is fine. But not introducing her, not showing how Rand met her, why he trusts her, why he's like desperate enough for some kind of human connection to like shack up with this woman in this weird place while trying to like sneak into the hospital setting thing to like talk to Logain. Like all of that was missing. And so I spent the first couple episodes just being like, what are you doing? Why are you here?
My mother actually called me and said,
did
I miss like an episode when they introduced this girl? I was like, no, they did not show this girl.
Like an episode they just like chopped from the script.
And there was no explanation.
Yeah, they never explained it.
Yeah, zero explanation whatsoever. And I'm going, okay, I would have been nice. Like what you just said would have been great to see. Let's have an episode where we see Rand really wallowing in his loneliness.
Breaking down. Like I'm overwhelmed. I'm gonna go mad. I left all my friends. I don't know what to do. And some woman like, you know, comes upon him and gives him a bed. Like, and he feels some attraction to her and she's nice to him, like something.
Or it's just the distraction, you know, something that would have made so much more sense. Instead, you get like they're in this relationship and apparently they have a history now. Okay. Like if we didn't, I mean, immediately, I will say this. I think that the show did a better job of making it less obvious that she was bad. It just was like, no, she just has a kink, you know, she's just kinky.
Yeah. They gave her like I don't know. I think it was obvious that she was leaning towards abusive. I don't think it was obvious that she was like a magical nemesis that was after him from the beginning. But I think you kind of knew she was bad news as far as like not the one you're gonna marry, Rand. Especially because he's already supposed to be so in love with Egwene that he gave up controlling the world for her. So like this kind of weird, what's your situation with this woman felt a little modern for me and a little bit just unexplained. Like it just needed a little bit more foundation to get me to buy into that relationship, even on a temporary basis. But of course, I also read the book, so I knew, who she was.
Well, I had not, at the point when I saw episode 1, I had not finished The Great Hunt. I mean, I haven't gotten to the point where it's revealed that she's Lanfear. So the show spoiled it.
You finished The Great Hunt.
I did. It's not revealed in The Great Hunt, is it?
Yes, it is. At the very end, Min is confronted by Lanfear. And
you're right. Okay, yeah.
Rand doesn't know. Rand doesn't know.
For some reason, I thought that happened in book 3.
No.
They're bleeding
Rand
together
doesn't know, but everyone else, like you as a reader, know.
Yeah. No, but I hadn't gotten to that point either way. I hadn't gotten to that point when the show was like, she's Lanfear. I was like, oh, snap. But I mean, in the book though, from the first time you meet her, you know she's bad. So I thought that it was a little harder to detect in the show. I mean, I think that even if I hadn't read those chapters where she's introduced in the what do you call that place in the stones? The parallel world
stone. The parallel world. It doesn't have a name.
That I think even if I hadn't read that, I would have been like, there's something up with this chick because she's clearly trying to manipulate him in some ways. But the thing is that they portrayed for long enough in the show that she's just kinky, and maybe Rand is now too, because he's diving into his darker side. I don't know what's going on. I would have had a harder time detecting that as early as I did. In the show, they did a better job of hiding that. But they didn't make her less evil seeming. They just made it seem like, oh, this is the norm. Like this is
and for those first 4 episodes, I hated every single scene with them because she just felt very unnecessary as like a character, other than my knowing who she was eventually going to be. Like if I watch it with my non-book brain, I was just frustrated that Rand is in this abusive relationship, like kicking dirt in Kyrian when he's the Dragon Reborn, or honestly, I don't know, just he thinks he killed the Dark One, I guess, but
the motives of all the characters in season 2, that's probably my biggest complaint about season 2 is we don't have really strong motivation for any of them for a very long time. What Egwene does, but she does nothing. Like nothing.
She do much.
Yeah, until she accidentally she doesn't accidentally, but she's in the Arches, and she's like not in the Arches, but Egwene. Egwene is at the Arches, like hoping to get Nynaeve back, and Nynaeve. And I'm like, oh, here she's doing something that's interesting. But then Nynaeve brings herself back, and I'm like, okay. It's like almost like did something with her. I was so happy when she got enslaved, actually, when Egwene got enslaved.
Something happened to you that was like interesting.
Yes.
And in the books. What I was going to say is that Lanfear, after episode 4, becomes the most interesting character in the show, because you know what her motivations are. She wants to be with Rand, and she wants him to be like Luce there, and she's willing to set things on fire and work with her greatest enemies and do whatever she needs to do to get him. And even if that's like kind of a silly like obsession for a 3,000-year-old,
it's a purpose.
It's a purpose. And so I enjoy seeing her on screen, even if what she's doing is very different from what she does in the books.
No, that's a really good point. And, that's something that you wish that these writers would get into their heads, is that we need to see that they're doing something, that there is an end goal. We can see where it's going. I love bringing up Game of Thrones as a great example, but like take any one of those characters in
what
like
they want.
Season
Marjorie
1
wants to be the queen. Cersei wants to be the queen. So when you see them in a scene together, you're that
like,
oh, fly. Yeah.
Yes. Any one of those characters
like
something that they're aiming for, exactly. It's they're just missing it on that. If you can't look at a character, especially in season 2, and know that, okay, I know what they're trying to do, what they want, what they have to be doing something, even if it's Rand running away. I didn't see him running away. I saw him stationary in one town, so like
but building up a little business with his woman.
He doesn't want to hurt the people that he loves, and yet he's living with and hooking up with this one woman. Like, so you don't love her? You don't care about her? Like, what is... Yeah. So
in order to be able to get into the sanitarium to see Logain so that he can learn to channel from a man that's been gentled. And then you find out that Logain was put there by Moiraine in some kind of convoluted scheme with Swan, but then Swan says that Moiraine is not following the plan. It's so convoluted. I don't know what any of these
She
characters
says
are
you're
trying
not.
to do.
Okay, so I didn't realize Swan was part of that, but makes sense. I mean, but still, it doesn't
She had
make
to have been because she had Logain and Tarvalin.
Yeah, she had.
So
You're
the only
right.
way to get him from Tarvalin to Kyrian is if Moiraine and Swan were in cahoots to move him from there to there, which means that they've been talking this whole time, and then in episode 7, suddenly she's pissed that Moiraine hasn't been doing what she wants her to do. Like, I don't know.
It's making me feel like Swan is actually the character that she was pretending to be in that throne room in the White Tower. Remember when she like got all ticked off at Moiraine and was like, fall
that
down
was
on
the
your
real
knees.
her. Yeah,
that was the real her.
Yeah.
Agreed. I don't understand the choices that are being made, and I would do anything to be in the writer's room just to listen to these decisions being made. And with the writer's strike, one of the things that was being demanded, and I didn't know this was a thing, but I've been involved in filmmaking for 22 years. Okay, just indie film. The writer, their script supervisor, or a representative of the writing team is always on set, because changes sometimes have to be made, and you've got to have the expert on the script who can say,
yep,
that doesn't make sense for that character to say this, or for this character to do this, or if you're going to do this, do it this way.
Yep.
That's why that person is there. And apparently, and this is what's been talked about with the writer's strike, is that that's not been the case for a while. And I'm going, some things are making sense now. I could just see it being like, okay, we've got the actors have their own interpretations of things, and the director has his, and whatever the cinematographer wants to do.
The script calls for this, but then in reality, they realize they can't do something for practical reasons,
or even they decide, wouldn't it be better? Or they say this, wouldn't it be cool if my character did this? And then they do it, and you go,
fun with it. Fun with it.
You don't have
How do
somebody
fit the horses through the way gates? Oh, I don't know. Let's just have the Aes Sedai abandon the horses and say they won't fit. And then in the next season, we'll show Leandrin leading horses through the way gates.
Oh my gosh. Okay. They say they would never survive the ways.
No, they never survive, yes. And then instead of leaving them, stabled in Tarvalin and walking there, they just like send them off.
Free. And just they off into the sunset. And I thought that like Lan's and Moraine's horses and Bella are like important horses. At least they're very much fan favorites.
Around.
Yeah. So
Mandarb and Bella stick around for all 14 books, I want to say.
Oh,
they're around.
Okay. They're not that important, I guess. Like,
no, they're not important.
Wait, they're there. It's a fan favorite. Come on. If you're gonna do fan service, do one of the ones that everybody seems to agree on. Like, we all love Bella. We all love the horses. So okay, whatever. Anyway. But yeah, you cannot watch season 2, by the way, with any if you love a good story and good characters, you can't watch season 2 without pretending season 1 didn't happen the way it happened. Yeah. I mean, just the resurrection of so many characters is bizarre enough. Yeah,
it's fun to watch, and I think people have lambasted me in the comments, being like, "Oh, you're being too harsh on it." And like, it's fun. I'm like, I agree that it's fun. I just can't watch it critically, because if I start thinking anything as it's going, I start to pick out all of these problems. If I just watch it as like a drama, without really thinking deeply about any of the character motivations, like it's just kind of a soap opera with magic and fun costumes in this location, and it's like, okay, this is kind of fun. I'll watch the next episode.
And see, I'm at that. I think I'm right about there too, except that I'm not having as much fun as I want to have because the characters are so unlikable. So I get there and I'm like,
that part's hard.
Now I have to watch this part with this other character I can't stand.
I don't know how they're going to redeem Matt in one episode, because he has been such a slug this entire show, and they're going to give him like one chance to kill Rand, but not kill Rand based on that vision that Min had. And then I do think we're going to get some of the plot line, but it's not going to be as impactful, because we haven't heard anything about the Horn of Valir other than it brings back the dead, which is not what it does. And like, I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to happen in this last episode.
I mean, you honestly can't, you really can't redeem Matt at this point. There's not enough time, no matter what he's going to do. My theory is that the whole stabbing Rand thing is something that would have happened in one of those other realities. but
Yeah.
we didn't see any of those other realities in the show. So I'm going,
No.
are they going to
I don't
introduce this in episode 8? Like, by the
At
way,
the last gasp, this is a dream that this thing happens, and
it's
then
going to feel like the Sangreal. Like, I'm like, why didn't you tell us what an Angreal was? Remember in
Right.
season 1? Instead, right before we get to the climax, here is the magic device that's going to defeat.
Well, it was also dumb too. Is like, hold this crystal. It has all the powers of all the male channelers, and you'll just like know what to do when we throw you at the dark one. The whole thing was so bad.
So bad.
But in this season, with this development that's supposed to happen with Rand dying or being stabbed, I've heard speculation that maybe Matt is going to stab Rand the way that Baalzamon stabs him in the books, and that they're gonna like make that sheathing of the sword thing some kind of like sacrificial thing that Matt does to Rand, which doesn't have the same gravitas as you taking the fall like for the world and saying like, I'm going to sacrifice myself to kill the Dark One, which is what Rand thinks he's doing in the books. And so like, I don't know how it makes sense. I don't know how they're going to yeek an ending out of that.
Okay. So, because here's what my interpretation of the ending is. I mean, I guess it's not interpretation. This is what it was led up to.
It's what you read.
He learns from Lan that sometimes you can make a desperate move where you basically take a hit so that your enemy's weapon is occupied and you can hit them. Like and it's a self-sacrificing move. Like that is, and that's great because it's introduced so early in the story, and then it pays off at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Since they haven't set that up, because did they mention a sheathing of the sword at any point?
Rand has learned nothing about swords in the show.
Well, he has from that one guy in the hospital.
Yes, a muttering madman whispered some things to him about sword forms, and then when Rand and Lan were reintroduced, Rand stumbled backward and Lan said, "That you're learning some sword moves," and then puts a sword on him, and he's like shoved into the Amarylline Seat's throne room, but he has not learned to use the sword. Let's not like pretend. This is
he has not.
Like a swordsman at this point.
If he can do anything with that sword, it'll be far less believable than even Nynaeve being able to handle the sword with the 2 warders who've been like training their entire lives.
Nynaeve knows more about sword than Rand does in the story. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so they haven't set that up, so I think you're right. I mean, if the writers are confident, it looks like they're not going to do that. Like I would say it wouldn't make sense to do that because you haven't set it up, so the payoff is not going to pay off.
Yeah,
it's going to be
no reason for him to even get in a sword fight because as we've established, he can't use a sword.
What have we seen? Okay, so if Matt is involved, he's
like trying to convince Matt to kill Rand, and then he like only stabs him instead, and that gives them the upper hand to do so. I don't know. I feel like it's going to be less satisfying than anything I can imagine.
Either way, it takes away the heroism of Rand, who is
it's going to feel more desperate and reactionary than what happens in the books, which felt more intentional and heroic. I don't think it's going to feel heroic.
And if they're doing it to save the character of Matt, that doesn't matter. I mean, at this point, Rand is your main character through the entire series, I'm guessing.
Is he? In the TV show?
Oh, in the show? No. But I mean, the TV show not making your main character a main character is a big mistake.
It's such a weird decision. I think maybe they got Rosamund Pike and they were like, let's just rewrite the script around her because she's like our only famous name.
I mean, my goodness, you guys had plenty of big stars in the background of like Harry Potter, and it worked.
True,
right?
I mean, that's what I expected. I thought she was going to be a big star in the, but playing the role of Moiraine for the, wise mentor role.
Still be there a lot.
A great role. Yeah.
Believe me, people were not watching this show for Rosamund Pike. I don't think.
No one tunes into it to be like, I want to see what she's doing. Like they might be more likely to watch it if they're like a fan of a fantasy TV shows and they learn that she's in it and they like her too. But no one's watching it because she's in it.
No,
it's not the reason. Yeah,
the decision makes no sense. But
again, that's guessing. I don't know what the original plan was. Anyway,
I really want the sky battle. I really want that.
I don't think we're gonna get it.
I think
we're going to get a battle on top of a tower and they're going to interpret it as in the sky, but I don't think we're going to get like a real sky battle.
I mean, I'm still so like, I'm almost like, I don't know how it happened in the book because you're in Rand's perspective. And then you get out and you find out like towns all over the country saw this battle happen. I'm like, how?
Yeah.
How? Were they giants?
spoilers for everyone that hasn't read the second book, because we'll discuss that briefly before we wrap up. It's been going on for a while.
Oh,
but
I'm sorry.
the I don't have anything to do. I just am conscious of the fact that we've been talking for almost 2 hours. So
I'm super chatty.
the ending of The Great Hunt, in my opinion, is not necessarily the most epic, but one of the more epic endings of all 14 books. Like, it just has this gravitas where you hear about the Horn of Valir, but I remember reading this book and not thinking they were going to blow the horn in the book. I thought there was going to be like, a fight to retrieve it and we save the horn for the dragon. I didn't think that they were going to blow it. It's like that moment when they're like, nothing says that can't be blown before the last battle, and then it's Matt that blows it, like, blew my mind. Like, as a new reader, like a new young adult reader, like I had no idea that was going to happen. And then when the heroes come and they not just like save Egwene, which is why they like blew the horn and saved them from these two armies encroaching, but they drive the Swanchan back into the sea, back across the ocean, like to where they came from. That was like it's like explosive, like epic ending. And then at the same time, you have Rand fighting what looks like the Dark One in the sky above Falme, or however you say it. And and then when he like takes the sacrifice and like the sheathing of the sword and gets that huge wound, and the Dark One like disintegrates or falls apart, and his sword disintegrates, like his sword. Like, so many like good moments. Like, that whole scene was incredible. And they don't even save Egwene through all of that. Like, Nynaeve had already saved.
does it, yeah.
And so
do you think they're gonna have Perrin blow the horn?
I don't know what they're going to do. I hope Matt blows it, but I don't know. And I don't know if they're going to make him, I don't want to spoil book 3 for you. Matt has a really good arc in book 3.
Oh, good. Okay.
So you haven't gotten there yet. Like, that is the book where he becomes a fan favorite. He starts to do some really fun things in book 3.
Okay. Yeah. I'm wondering if they're going to have Perrin blow it, because honestly, what the hell has Perrin done this season? What did he do?
None of the boys have done anything. Rand shacked up with a woman who then like betrayed him. Like, he's a bunch of ineffectual plans, and then like runs into Land, who says, whatever happens to you, take it on your feet. And then he's like pushed onto his knees in like one scene and like stays there the rest of the episode. And, and now he's begging the Forsaken for help. That's Rand's story. And
oh my gosh,
Aaron is like wandering in the wilderness and like chasing after his friends. But the only ones we know of that are still in captivity with the Swanchan are Ingtar, whose name I don't even think has been dropped this season. So no one's gonna like really know.
It was in episode 1.
Okay, briefly.
But off screen.
But he's a character we care about, like, in the TV show.
I cared more about
a good story in the books. Like, he was such an interesting story with him as like a dark friend who wanted redemption. Like, that was a moving story.
That was good.
Huron's not in it. Loyal is captured, so I guess Perrin will save Loyal. That might be what he does. So I don't think it's gonna have the same like Robin Hood's feeling as the book, but we'll see. We'll see in a couple of days.
I have this theory that you cannot start a story, especially with illogical progression, like we had in season 1. You cannot start it rough and then get it to the point that we feel like this is excellent. It can be a little bit better, but it'll never be great. It's like the best we're going to get of this show, I think, is going to be mediocre. I think there'll be maybe scenes that we go, I liked how they did that.
Yeah,
but honestly, you could have literally chopped it out of this show and put it on its own, like, and here's a 3-minute segment of, and I'd go, ooh, that's cool. But it would affect me just as much like that as it would being within the show. So
I'm not going to get like teary-eyed or like feel the emotional upwelling from anything. I might smile. I might have a little fun. It'll be enjoyable to watch, but it's not going to have like that deep impact that a really well show does. And I don't expect all shows to be well written. I watch a lot of dumb TV, but this source material that they had like provided a great story that you could have just adapted, and that's what's frustrating to me. Like, it could have been so much better.
And you had it in your notes, and I think we talked about it a little bit, was that, okay, if you're going to do an adaptation, there's all the hard work really is done for you. All you have to do is compress for time. You're going to take some plot lines and you're going to make, mush them together. You're going to take some characters and you're going to mush them together. The only time you should add something, and this is for a faithful adaptation, only time you add something is to either enhance what's already there or to make up for the gap that you have to create because you cut something out,
Right.
but there's so much that has been added in the show that I'm going, this is clearly its own thing now, so I'm not sure why it's here. And yeah, I really wish that they would spend more time on the things that are actually in the book, because they are exciting, they are interesting to read, and I would love to see them on screen. And that means the work is really already done for you. Why does it have to, I mean, my gosh.
More work for them.
Yes.
To have to, like, take all these elements, put them in a blender, and then try to like recreate a new story that they're writing as a committee of writers. Like, I can't imagine something so hard.
They're not doing that work though. Like, there's putting the same amount of effort that like a straight adaptation would be, except that they're not straight adapting. They're doing the fanfic thing, right?
Right.
But then they're not like they're like, oh, we need to have Rand be the dragon. Okay, so it's him. Like, we did all the stuff we wanted with the other characters and neglected him and what would be important for what we're going to do with him at the end. But now it's Rand, and his temptation is going to be he has to give up Egwene or whatever. Like, that's great. Like, you didn't do the work to adapt the change that you made. You didn't even do the work to make that work. So
yeah,
I don't get
it's
it.
really shallow. Okay, well, this has been really, really fun. I enjoyed chatting with you this time. Clearly, we went like way over the like hour 45 minutes.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't be sorry. It was a lot of fun. I know that this season's almost over, but if you want to do more videos with me, let me know. I've read a lot of books. Oh, they're here. I read a lot of books. And I have a lot of, I think we've seen some of the same things. So if you read Piranesi and want to do like a dive on that, like, happy to do that.
Well, I'm just gonna be looking across in your bookshelf and being like, okay.
Or The Dragon Reborn. We could do like a dive into the book, since you'll probably finish that.
That would be good. Yeah.
The show comes out. Like, just let me know. But I'm, happy to do more of these. I think this style is actually easier in some ways, where you're just like talking with someone else rather than trying to.
You're sitting there by yourself with a giant eyeball camera staring at you going,
trying to maintain the stamina.
Yes.
To talk through the whole episode.
So Rebecca was also saying that she wants to do something like this too. So if you ever want to do like everybody, like, that would be fun too.
Yeah, happy to do that.
I would love to do it. And it can be on Wheel of Time. It can be on other stuff. I'm game for just about anything.
All right. Well,
no, I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'll probably see you again. So we'll talk more.
Yes.
I'll be texting you about the finale. We definitely got to whatever.
Oh yes, let's chat on the finale. I'm sure it'll be.
I'm sure whatever it is going to be like. It's going to subvert our expectations. So,
yes. Okay. So for viewers, if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so. If you are interested in Amber's channel, it's the Sword and the Pen Reflections, right? That's where you're talking about Wheel of Time is Sword and the Pen Reflections, which is different from your main channel, Sword and the Pen. And come tune in for our future videos. She still has to do season 2, and I'll be doing episode 8 of season 2, probably sometime this weekend. So
and we'll see you around.
See you around.